What type of students fail out of flight school? What are some, not necessarily personality traits, but what are some signs that a student is or is planning to or doesn't want to be at flight school anymore? You could just tell that they're probably not going to make it if they change their behaviors or their attitudes or their habits. Let me just say this. I think that most people are very trainable. I have not met a single student that I've had yet that I looked at them and was like, you can't do this. Not yet. I'm sure they exist. I've heard horror stories, but I just haven't encountered one. So I go into the attitude with every student is perfectly capable of doing this if they put their mind and their energy and their effort into this. With that being said, what are some signs that I see in students that they're going to struggle more or that they might not make it because of whatever reasons, okay? The first thing is that when they have a full-time job. I know it's not fair because a lot of people have to work while going to school because that's how they pay the bills, that's how they feed their family or rent, whatever. But if somebody is telling me that they are working full time, they're working 5, 6 days a week, what that's telling me as their instructor is that you're not going to have a lot of time to train. And in a career field, in a school where you need to be training like at least 2 or 3 days a week, you telling me that you can only train once a week is going to be a problem because we're all about, you have to maintain that proficiency. And aviation is not like riding a bike. It's very unforgiving. If you do not fly and you're a brand new pilot, you don't fly for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to see some serious dissipation of skills. So that's one of the things that I first see is that people have full-time jobs and that just makes it harder to train. Like that's pretty obvious, right? Secondly is it surprisingly is GI Bill students I've noticed, even though they have like a prior service background, like military, I noticed that the GI Bill gives them this false sense of security. Like they don't care as much if they fail a check ride or if they burn hours that they don't need to or whatever, because the GI Bill is fronting a lot of that. So they come in kind of a little bit more lackadaisical and a little bit more nonchalant compared to like these guys who are just paying out of pocket. And the reason why I know that is because I'm a GI Bill student. I used my GI Bill to pay for my training, and my instructor, he paid for it out of pocket. And we were just laughing at like the attitude differences sometimes between people who pay out of pocket and people who are on the GI Bill, because the GI Bill is fronting it all. You know what I mean? Like literally they front it all. So you would expect an attitude difference. And I noticed that these GI Bill guys, they kind of have like one foot in the door, one foot out the door, where they're like, I'm not really losing anything from this except for my GI Bill time. And, I'm kind of just like testing the waters and seeing if I like this. You don't really get that a lot with people who are paying out of pocket. People who are paying out of pocket generally like know that this is what they want to do and this is how they're going to do it. And I just noticed that they have a little bit more dedication towards aviation. That's not always the case, though. That's kind of like a generalization. I'm not saying it's particularly fair. It's just my observation. Third, I would say that the type of student who I see, like kind of red flags, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be tough for you, is the gamers, right? The video gamers, the guys who spend a lot of time playing video games, and that's kind of like their priority. And I know that because that was me going through flight school. I was really addicted to Apex Legends, and I'd be like, should I study or should I play Apex Legends or World of Warcraft or whatever it was? I had to get rid of that system outright. I straight up sold it to GameStop for $40 and never looked back. And deleted all my World of Warcraft characters and just focused on flight school because it was just too distracting. So gamers, and that's really anyone who, really what I'm saying is just when somebody has an interest outside of aviation that takes up an absurd amount of time. It could be anything. It could be bowling, golf, sports, whatever. All right. It's, aviation is about time management. If you're not managing your time correctly, like it's going to be really hard for you to pass flight school and to get through it on time and to save that money and to not be in flight school for years. Another type of, an archetype that I see in students who are struggling, is students who have kind of like cocky, arrogant attitudes, kind of like hazardous attitudes. I don't really get this as much in my students, and if I do, I'm kind of like quick to not let that escalate into worse scenarios. But yeah, I don't have that problem too much with students. I've just seen it in some schools sometimes and stuff like that. But they just think that that they're better than this and they don't have to train as often as they want to, and that they're God's gift to aviation. That attitude really doesn't last very long in aviation. You're often humbled pretty quick. I remember in the beginning of my instrument training, I was feeling pretty good and I got a little cocky and arrogant, and my instructor was like, all right, let's go to a towered airport and do this approach and then go miss and then immediately go in another approach. And I got my ass kicked. And he was like, that's why you can't get cocky, because it always gets harder. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I remember that. if my instructor is watching this, he took me to shoot the 1-0 left out of Boise and immediately go miss to Junga. And the programming time between Boise and Nampa is like 4 to 5 minutes. And you're talking to ATC, programming, briefing. It was a nightmare. So I was like really humbled after that. But generally speaking, if you go into flight school, like, you know, appreciative and grateful for the opportunity and the experience, which not a lot of people get, even the people who, you know, could pay out of pocket. You know, if you go into it humble and appreciative and grateful, and willing to learn and accept that flight school is going to be difficult and that this is going to be a part of your life where, you know, it's going to be hard and that you're going to be challenged and you're going to have those days where you're driving home and you're just dead silent because you had such a bad flight or whatever it is. Okay. Go into this with an open mind and be prepared to learn and accept criticism. Also, another thing I've noticed in people and students, that if you fail to accept criticism from your instructor, constructive criticism, of course, there's a line. If you fail to accept criticism, you're gonna have a problem, because this is not one of those fields where you can just go skate by and just ignore everyone's critique, because that critique, that constructive criticism they're giving you is gonna save your life or save the airplane or keep you from getting hurt or whatever. You know, if somebody keeps telling you, hey, you're getting slow on base to final, and you're like, yeah, it wasn't that slow, you're gonna get got one of these days, I promise you. But stay humble, stay disciplined, and learn how to take criticism and make this your life and your focus, and you will be fine. I promise you. See ya.